Welcome to this Inventor Dibs and Jigs video. This is going to be how you get something from Inventor into Showcase and get it looking absolutely dapper. If you're thinking, what's Showcase? What is Showcase? Well, if you've got Product Design Suite, then you've got Showcase. It comes installed with the bundle. You've got it somewhere on your USB stick or on your subscription center. If you don't have Showcase, then tough shit. You just can't have it, I guess. And yeah, I'm not even sure if you can buy it. But if you're not sure what it is, and you might have Googled it. So let's open up some Chromage and let's look for Autodesk Showcase. I probably should have had this pre-prepared, but you know. There we are, so that's what Showcase is, and you might have saw that, and you might have thought, I want a piece of that ass. Why can't I do that? I want to do this. I want to be the guy that does this. Well, I'm going to show you how to do that. A couple of warnings before we get started though, right? Everything is going to be 2016, so there might be different buttons, different menus, different terminology, depending on what version you're using. Secondly, you need a pretty good computer, right? You do need a pretty decent PC to get a good result out of Showcase, because it's really high-end. I'm using an i7 490K. Which turbos up to 4.6 gigahertz. My graphics card's a GTX 970, and I'm using 32 gig of DDR3. And you need a good PC. You can work on a crap PC, but it's just going to be slower. The last caveat, just before we get started, is I'm going to have to try my absolute hardest to not go off on a tangent and explain everything that I'm doing, because Showcase is really interesting and it's really tempting to kind of explain everything that I'm doing and all the different things you can do, but the video will end up being huge. So I need to keep this as tight as I can. I need to make sure I'm just keeping to the point. And that point is how you get your model from Inventor into Showcase using as few steps as possible, but trying to get the best result as possible. So what we're doing in this particular video is we're taking an okay looking Inventor model. It's a robot arm. And we want to put it into Showcase and get a really good render of it. So Showcase, again, if you're not too sure what it does, it's not a modeling package. Showcase doesn't model anything. It imports data and then it renders it using ray tracing, using lighting effects, and you get a pretty good image at the end of it. You can do all that sort of stuff in Inventor, but Showcase is just another angle. It's a different rendering engine to a certain degree, and you can apply different effects, different textures, different materials. There's different outputs, different behaviors, that sort of stuff. So it's kind of a crossover, but you know, it's just another option that you've got. So actually that wasn't the this is the final one, but it's just common sense, this one. Shit in, shit out. If you're putting in a model that's a box with a hole in it, think about it, son. If you've got a box with a hole in it sat on your desk, it ain't gonna look good. Showcase isn't a magician. Right, it ain't no Harry Potter. It's just not going to make things look brilliant if they already, by default, look shit. So that's why I've picked this robotic arm type thing, because it looks pretty good. You know, with a few textures on this is going to look absolute boss. So let's get started. So the first thing we need to do is just save your model. You don't need to do anything to it. You can, if you want, apply textures to it in Inventor, but what I'd highly recommend you do is just leave it as default and leave Showcase for the textures. So it's just grey. So this is the default color. So we're going to save this. We're going to shut it down. We're going to fly across to Showcase, and we're going to import our data. So we've got a blank Showcase scene, and the way we import our data is we go File, Import your files, pick your robot arm. You go to this is optional. Go to your settings. For the geometry, for the conversion settings, just select all purpose. Again, I really want to explain what these all are, but time and all that. For the original up axis, select auto detect, and it'll try and detect which way your model should be up, and if it comes in backwards you can rotate it once it's in Showcase, but we're just going to stick with auto detect. We're not going to be asked about all the shots and alternatives and stuff, because again we just want a decent picture. We're not wanting to create some fancy cinematic here, so we're just going to leave all the rest of it as default and import. It's then going to ask you where your project file is. So obviously if you're importing an assembly, it needs to find where all the parts are. So if you've got an assembly with a lot of parts and a project file that goes along with it, select that project file and it'll start bringing in all the components. And this particular stage can take, depending on the size of your model, it can take 5 minutes, it can take 2 minutes, it can take half an hour, it can take an hour or longer. So we're just going to pause the video now and pick it up once it's finished importing. Right, we're in. We're all in, and it looks pretty good actually. Well, as soon as it hits Showcase, it does look mint straight from the bat. So a few things we need to do just to make sure the model's prepped, dressed and ready. We need to check the surface quality. We need to check the surface normals. The way you do that is you go to Appearance, go to the Visual Styles library, and then underneath Diagnostics here, select Normals. Everything should be blue. If you see anything yellow, that means that Showcase has imported a surface or a face the wrong way around. And if you find anything yellow, you need to go into the surfacing editing area and then flip the faces. Make sure everything's blue. Usually, if it's a decent enough Inventor model, everything should come in fine. I've never actually seen anything yet come in with yellow faces, so go to the normals and then everything should be fine. Once we've done that, go back to Shadows and Ambient Shadows, and then we're back to the way it was before. Right, next thing we need to do, again, just the next step towards getting it to a decent enough quality where you can produce a photorealistic-ish render, we need to do something with the ambient shadows. Ambient shadows are shadows between objects. It's a shadow cast from one object to another. So, for example, if we look in here, this plate here, if you were to think about this object being outside or inside, having light cast on it, right? There's not going to be much light in here, in this gap between these two faces, because light isn't going to get in there very well. So this shadow here is an ambient shadow. Same over here. We've got ambient shadows going on in there. In the holes, there's a good ambient shadow there. But they're not brilliant. These are actually just preview shadows. Showcase it's creating like a dynamic ambient shadow between objects, and it looks okay. It looks actually quite good, but it's not the best. So what we're going to do is bake on some higher quality ambient shadows, and by baking them, I mean we're going to be baking them, so they're going to be permanently applied to the model. So they're pre-calculated high quality ambient shadows. To do this, we're going to select Control and A. So that's the Control and then A button. So select all. We're going to go to Appearance, the drop-down menu, and then we're going to select Ambient Shadows. So at the moment we're just working with the preview quality, so it's okay, but it's not brilliant. We're going to select the drop-down list and we're going to bake them on. So select Baked. For the presets, we've got a number of different presets. These are sort of low impact up to high impact options. So depending on where your model is going to be rendered, are you going to have an interior scene, so is it going to be an indoor scene, or is it going to be an exterior scene? The ambient shadows behave differently if something's outdoors as to indoors. It's different light quality, it's a different light source altogether, really. So we're going to select exterior, and then if we go to the preset properties in here, this is I'm kind of going off topic. I want to explain what everything is, but I just don't have the time. These are just impact quality. Bigger is better, smaller is not. So we're just going to stick with the default 3 and then 256 samples. That's a pretty good quality. It's good enough. If you've got all the time in the world, bump these up higher. It'll take longer to compute them, but you'll get a better quality. So we've got various other settings here for drop off. That's more of an interior setting, but if you're happy enough with everything that you've got there, select Bake, and then that'll go through and then render the shadows and bake them onto the models. Again, depending on the size of your model and the quality of the shadows that you've applied, it can take a while to do this. It can take up to 10 minutes, it can take just 2 or 3 minutes. It's entirely dependent on your processor, your computer. But to be honest, the way I look at this, if something takes a long time to do, it's worth it, because it's just the way things are in life, and especially in computing. If something happens immediately, you get suspicious and you think, hang on a minute, that should have taken longer. Good things come to those who wait, etc., so on and so forth, as these sayings go. So I'm going to pause the video again and pick it up once it's finished doing this. Right, it's about to finish. What I want you to do, if you can, just stare at the model, because it's just there, it's just applied the higher quality shadows. Now if you want to rewind and then press play so you can see the difference, by all means do that, so you can see like before and after. But the quality of the shadows now are much better than they were earlier. So these are no longer like a preview dynamic shadow, they're much higher quality. The gradient on the shadow, the drop off on the shadows is much better. We've got shadows now where we didn't have shadows before. It just looks a lot better. It just looks a lot better. It's very subtle, but the subtle things make a massive difference in the world of rendering. So if you want to see where your ambient shadows are, go to the Appearance library, go to the Visual Styles library, and then select this one here underneath Diagnostic, go to Ambient Shadows, and that provides like a contrast view. So it puts your model to like a high contrast white, and then you can see the black areas where the ambient shadows are. Let me just go back to Shadows and Ambient Shadows. Right, what's next? The next thing we need to do, in the next step towards making this look as realistic as possible, is materials and textures or appearances, depending on what product you're using. Materials, textures, and appearances. It's sort of the same thing in Showcase. So what we need to do is go to Appearance at the top, then go to the Material Library. Up here at the top, right, the Material Browser, the Material Manager is a bit frustrating in Showcase in that you can't move it around. It's sort of docked and baked onto the left hand side of the screen. We can't move this around, which is a bit annoying, but it is what it is. So we can move this arrow around, we can move things up and down just by sliding this little bar here. But these three textures up here, these are the textures that have come across from Inventor, and yours will be different. Yours will be named something different. Mine are just default, some random name and some RGB color. So they're nothing, they're rubbish. We need to change them. What I recommend that you do is, if you need to keep the textures from Inventor, fine. But it's just a personal preference of mine. I prefer using the Showcase textures because I find them a higher quality. Showcase gives you three libraries. We've got Showcase Materials, which is then when you expand it, it gives you a load of different categories, so car paints, metals, plastics, rubbers, that sort of stuff. You've got an extended library, which is even more textures. So we've got woods, we've got different types of paints, different types of metals in here. We've got Autodesk Materials. Now this is the material library that Autodesk used to translate textures across different products. So Inventor has got the Autodesk Materials library, so you might have seen like the ceramic tiles, which are absolutely useless in Inventor, but they're there to allow you to select a material or a texture in Inventor and that to be recognized in Showcase or Max or any other Autodesk product that you're using. So it's part of that initiative to make sure that the products harmonize better. Harmonize, what a nice word. Harmony, quite. So what we're going to do is use one of the Showcase materials and then apply that to our model. But how do we do this? It's easy. It's intuitive. It's as intuitive as you'd want it to be. So you find the texture that you want. So this is going to be painted, and I think I want it to look good. So car paint. I mean, again, it's not important to know this, but it's worth knowing it. Showcase originated from the automotive industry. It was all about cars, car presentation. Volkswagen, Bugatti, Skoda, the likes of these companies use Showcase to present their vehicles on catalogs and commercial leaflets and that sort of stuff. So it's heavily biased towards the car industry. That's why you see a lot of car stuff. There's a lot of glass in there. There's a lot of plastic dashboard textures. So there's a good chance, again, I don't have it on any authority, but there's a good chance the car paints are really well optimized. So if you're going to be painting this robot yellow, well then use one of the car paints. It's still paint at the end of the day. It's still a color, but it'll look good. So what you do is you select the object, and then you select the color paint that you want, and it'll apply that texture to that object. And then if we look at the scenes, the materials in our scene, so that's added yellow dark to that particular part. And if we just do an sorry, I forgot to mention, there are some subtle differences between Inventor and Showcase when it comes to just navigating around. You might be at the point where you're thinking, I need to orbit, I need to pan, how do I do this? F4 is not working. Well, yeah, things are a little bit different in Showcase, right? To orbit, to do a 3D orbit, hold down the Alt key on your keyboard, and then that activates the orbit. Hold down the left mouse button, and then you can pivot around. It's very similar to Inventor in that you can set the pivot point as well. So that little green circle here is the pivot point that the camera is orbiting around. It's the focal point of the camera. If you left click somewhere else, it'll set that as the pivot point. It'll pivot around that point. Zoom in and zoom out is your mouse wheel, as it always is in pretty much every other Autodesk product other than the Alias stuff. And hold down the left wheel is pan, zoom in, zoom out, Alt to orbit. So the only real difference is the Alt key. So everything else is the same. So there's our yellow paint applied to that particular part, but on my model it's made up of a number of different faces and not faces, but a number of different objects. Everything's been brought in and sort of respected from the assembly environment, so I've got loads of different parts here. How do I apply a texture to an entire sub-assembly? Well, fortunately, and this is credit to the guys at Autodesk for allowing the Showcase to sort of acknowledge this area of the Inventor model, we can look at the part structure in Showcase by going to the edit menu and then selecting the organizer, or the O key on the keyboard is the shortcut for it. So this organizer is your Inventor browser. It's the sub-assemblies. So if you just want to select everything and make it all one color, except this one at the bottom here, no, it's this one here. That's the claw, sort of the robot hand thing, the jaws. I don't want to make that yellow. I'm going to select everything by just selecting Control and then click, 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 and then select everything other than the jaws, and then we can just click the material that we want and it'll apply it to everything other than this bottom unit here. Now there's a couple of things in here in the model that I don't want yellow, so like for example the hydraulic piston or the cylinder that we've got here, that there isn't going to be painted yellow. Obviously that's going to be like a chrome colour, so we can select that, we can go to the library, we can have a look around and go, right, well I know there's more metals in the extended library, so let's go to the chrome area and make that like chrome satin. Yeah, that'll do. Showcase is good for chromes, but in some scenes chromes can be so reflective that they don't look very realistic. It's a personal preference, but that can be the case. So I like to have more of a matte finish on the chromes. So we've selected chrome matte to this part here, and now for the hand. I don't have time to put material on everything. We see we've got fasteners in here, we've got like nuts and bolts and washers and all sorts in here. In a production environment I would apply a different material to the different parts in here, but oh god, that's bloody awful that. No, can't have that. We're going to change that. Let's put it back to chrome polished. That'll do. So what we can do with this, you can window select stuff, so we can just put a window around the claw itself and then make this, I don't know, stainless steel polished brushed. It hasn't changed that much, but if we zoom in you can see the quality of the texture is pretty good. It is actually what it is. There are ways of sort of magnifying and scaling up the textures, but again that's for another video. But for a first pass we'll just leave it the way it is. It'll still look shiny when we come to do a final render. And then the final thing we've got here is this sort of cylindrical fascia up here, which I don't know if there's more than one part in here, but we'll just select all of that and then we'll make it black maybe? I don't know. Let's go for car paints and then black metallic. Yeah, why not? Make that a black metallic. Right, I'm happy enough with that. So what we're ready to do now is put a background in, and this is almost the final step in making the model look absolutely awesome. It's the background. So Showcase, you might be familiar with Inventor's backgrounds. If not, I'll explain what Showcase uses. Showcase uses image-based lighting backgrounds. Now, an image-based lighting background is a spherical, three-dimensional sort of dome, which it puts inside your scene, puts it around your model, and it has a picture wrapped around the dome. And that picture will reflect off the model and cast lights onto the model. So you're getting the effect that the background is reflecting off your model, which makes it look immediately and instantaneously more realistic. So to see the different backgrounds that Showcase has, go to the Appearance drop-down menu and then select the Lighting Environment library. So just like the materials, at the very top, these are the environments, the lighting environments that are in your current scene. It's just using the default one, which is called BP Gradient. I don't know what BP stands for, but that's the one that we're using at the moment. Down here, we've got a number of different preset backgrounds that Autodesk have given you to use for your models. Now you can import your own, which is quite easy to do. It's another topic for another video, but it's quite easy to do that. But I find that a lot of these are good. Now some of them are absolutely fucking garbage, like the Country Road is so pixelated and blocky, it should be binned. But some of them are really good. Now for a manufacturing based render, I find that the docks one is really good. It has an amazing quality of picture for the background, and the lighting, the ambient lighting is amazing. So we're going to select the docks, left click this one here, and then that'll import the scene. And if we zoom out just so you can see what it is, that's all it is. Like I said, it's a dome which it puts around your model, and then the image is wrapped around the dome, and that image casts light onto your model and it reflects off your model as well. So if we look at the where can we see a good reflection? Probably on the claw. Can we see the background reflecting on there? Not really. Not really. Everything's cylindrical. But you can see here, there's a sort of picture of a house in the background, and you can see that reflecting on the side of the robot, which is, again, it adds that extra level of realism, which looks really good. So, for some people, that might be good enough. Right? At the moment, we're using what's called hardware rendering. So this is your graphics card rendering the image and giving it a good enough effect. This might be good enough for you. If this is good enough for you, go to the File menu at the top and then select Publish Image, You can set some different things. You can set anti-aliasing if you want to, change this to local only so it doesn't try and copy images up to the cloud, and then select publish image, and then it'll publish it to your desktop. Pretty much what you see. However, we're going to take this to the next level. We're going to apply one final camera effect, and then we're going to apply the final level of realism, which is the ray traced rendering environment. So what we're going to do with the camera is apply an f-stop value to it. We're going to blur out the background because, again, in some pictures that are sort of high quality catalog type images, you get this sort of professional blurred effect in the background, which makes it look like you've got to focus on the object in the foreground. And you can do that in Showcase quite easily. So you go to the edit menu, and then no, you don't. You go to the view menu and then go to camera properties. In camera properties, we've got the focal length here. Now this is the amount of perspective which is applied to the camera. At the moment it's set to 50, which is almost a wide angle lens, but if you move that closer you can see what it's doing. It's just applying like more of a wide angle, more of a perspective effect on the camera. But I find that 50 is around about fine. It's fine. The less it starts to look more orthographic, move it up towards 50 and it looks more perspective-y. I'm trying to get it bang on. Oh, for fuck's sake, I was going to type in 50. Right, to get the blurred effect on the camera, we're going to go to Show More Controls, and then Enable Depth of Field. Right, with that enabled, immediately it's blurred out the background, so it's already looking more professional. There is no right number here. It's entirely trial and error based on the size of the model that you're working with and the size of your background. So what you do is you select center of interest and then hold down Alt and then select where your pivot point your camera is, and that becomes the focal point of the camera. And all of these focal distance and f-stop values are then based off the center of interest. The center of interest being what you want the user to focus on. So with that in mind, you can then use the slide bars to change the focal distance, and you can see as you're dragging this, the blurred effect is sort of coming closer, and we'll leave it about there. I think that's fine. Then we've got the f-stop value, which again applies, it's changing how much light is coming out of the camera, I do believe. I'm not a photographer, but that's what Google says, so we'll just put that to around there. And that already is looking unbelievably realistic. I mean, I'm really happy with that. For most people, that might actually be just fine for a render. But we're gonna get this ray traced, right? We want this to look absolutely delicious, and the final step is ray tracing. So ray tracing is a different rendering engine. It uses your CPU to calculate where the lights are and how the light bounces off the textures and where all the shadows are going to be finally cast in their final resting place. So to enable ray tracing, you select the Visual Styles button at the bottom, select ray tracing, and then that'll apply a default level of ray tracing to your scene. Ray tracing works in passes as well. It will apply different render levels, and these are passes. So it's applying 5 and then 6 render levels, and as each render pass goes up, the scene becomes more realistic. All the different rays of light. It's doing the computations in passes. If you want it to be even more realistic, if you want it to be even higher quality than it is right now, go to the settings for the ray tracing status. You've got the interactivity here. If you want it to be much better, just drag that all the way up to the top. Obviously, the higher the quality, the longer it's going to take, but that's sort of common sense. We can go advanced settings here, and this is the anti-aliasing. Put that up to 1. This can be increased as well, the desired trace depth, but just always remember the higher the value, the longer it's going to take to compute. But it just looks amazing. It looks absolutely phenomenal. And we've got 2 different types of lighting modes in here. We've got basic and we've got advanced. If you select advanced, again, it takes longer to compute, but the longer you leave it, the better the image will be. There's no right or wrong. I wish I could say leave it for so many levels before it's fine. It's entirely, it depends on your model, it depends on your PC. I would say in most cases for basic and advanced, give it to about 10 levels before it starts to look as good as it's going to get. Any further passes are going to refine it, but maybe not massively noticeable. And then we can click OK. So you might be thinking, hang about, you're doing all this, but that first one you did, that first non-ray traced is fine. That was absolutely fine. What's the difference? What is ray tracing actually doing? Well, what I've done is I've created some before and after shots for hardware rendering. So it's not the same model, but it's the same colors, same sort of thing. This is non-ray traced. It's got the f-stop, it's got the blurred focal distance going on in the camera, but it's non-ray traced. I'm going to press the right arrow on the keyboard and it's going to jump to a ray traced, exact same shot, but ray traced. No, it's not. I'm going to, right, that's absolutely dog shit preparation, Neil, so we're going to get rid of the photo which is distorting the before and after. So right, there's the non-ray traced. That's ray traced. Non-ray traced. Ray traced. What's the difference? Well, on the ray traced image, look up here. We've got this reflection being cast from the backside of this object onto this object here. On the non-ray traced picture, that isn't there. It's not calculating that level of realism. We've got reflections inside these crevices here. On the hardware rendered one, the non-ray traced picture, that's not there. Look inside here, we've got just a higher quality of shadows and reflections being cast around here. Down here we've got sort of glare of light being reflected from here. The light source is somewhere up here, so that light's hitting this object, bouncing back onto this one, and you can see that being reflected there. So it's actually debatable which one's best. This one is more realistic, but for some people this one's just fine, and it's a lot quicker. For this picture, this is advanced lighting with 8 passes, and it probably took around about 20 to 30 minutes. It wasn't done on this PC I'm using now, it was done on a Xeon, quite an early, it was an HP Z400 PC, which is about 5 years old now, but it was good, it was quick enough. And this one here was 10 passes, so it's basic ray tracing at 10 passes, that's advanced ray tracing at 8 passes, and that's hardware rendered. So if we jump back to my session, so we're up to how many? Oh no, I turned ray tracing off, didn't I? So that's pretty much it. That's how you get a model from Inventor across into Showcase, using some very basic, quick tweaks just to get it to a point where you think, yeah, that's great, that'll do. There's a lot more you can do in Showcase, and I probably will end up doing a series of videos on each particular area of Showcase, which you can refine to get a better result in these niche pinpoint areas. But that would make this particular video take ages, so I'm going to leave it there. Hopefully you found that useful. If you did, guys, thanks very much. I hope it was. Press like on the video, press dislike if there was something you didn't like about it. Write down the comments down below if there's something you're a bit pissed with. Subscribe, and until next time, cheery bye, toodle pip.